Self-hate is one of the most dangerous coping mechanisms. So, the function of our ego is to help us survive in the external world. And he does that by creating strategies and behaviors that help us decrease, manage, or eliminate the level of distress caused by external events. This is what a coping mechanism is. When we feel like we can't change something or deal with a strong emotion as kids, the ego creates a coping mechanism that actually served us well in that moment, but as we grow up, those same coping mechanisms start to become dangerous and detrimental to ourselves. To understand why self-hate is a coping mechanism and not just a feeling, we have to go way back to our childhood and even past generations. When we grow up in a dysfunctional home, what we can observe is that at the root of each person's self-concept and family is shame. Shame occurs when a kid does something that their caregivers don't approve of and are then seen as a disappointment or a bad person. To understand more about shame, you can watch my video called Shame. This feeling of shame has been passed down from generation to generation. It is the primary stressor in the household. Everyone has to find a way to cope with that shame. And the ways they cope with that shame set up the dysfunctional family system and determines what role each person will play in it. So for example, the so-called the golden child or the favorite one, which are the ones that end up being people pleasers, in a family cope by throwing away their identity. They lose all their boundaries. They become like a mini-me of the parent in order to feel safety and belonging in the family system. And here is where self-hate starts to develop. When a child does something that parents don't approve of, shame forces a split inside of him. The one part that has to behave in a certain way, and the other that does not like to behave that way because it doesn't feel authentic. A child cannot always mirror the parent's behavior. It's way too difficult. And here is where the parents feel threatened and makes them feel shame. So when the child cannot be what the parents want, this invalidates the parent's identity and beliefs and will cause them to feel threatened by this child. Sometimes a child is unable to adapt to their environment or connect with their parents by rejecting their own identity. And this failure to adapt will make the parent subconsciously turn against the child, making them the scapegoat or the troublemaker. The parent's aim is to avoid the shame they feel about themselves, shifting that shame onto the child by emotionally distancing themselves from them. This creates a dangerous environment for the child, as the family hides their dysfunction behind the child's perceived inability to adapt. And the family portrays themselves as victims, while labeling the child as the one in need of fixing. But actually, there is nothing wrong with that child. What is wrong is that their entire family has turned against him. And unfortunately, the other members of the household are blind to this reality. The experience of being rejected by the very people one needs and loves the most is indescribable. It's just pure torment. And as a result, this child has no sense of safety. Growing up in such an environment profoundly affects the development of their nervous system, which adapts to a constant state of insecurity. It's like you are walking on eggshells all the time. This child feels hated by their family, especially by the parent who poses the bigger threat to their self-concept. And this environment is what makes the ego to develop short-term coping mechanisms that ultimately destroys your life in the long run. But it was the way to survive emotionally. Now, what happens when you push parts of you away? Do they really disappear? Of course not. You wouldn't have all this pain inside of you if that would be possible. So, what happens is that your consciousness creates a split. The one side are the aspects that your parents despises or that you perceive as being despised by them, and on the other side is where you start to behave exactly like they want you to. For example, let's say that you grow up in a family of doctors, but you as kid always loved painting and wanted to always do that and only that. But because your parents see that as just a hobby for kids with no future, or that is just not an accomplishment, you will be forced to push that part of you away and starting to hate the feeling of wanting to paint, and force yourself to like human body parts and force yourself to study medicine just so that you can feel and believe that your parents loved you. And that in return gives you a sense of belonging and safety. And the worst is that now you start to develop an antagonist. It's like a little policeman inside of your head that acts exactly like your parents act with you. And the policeman's job is to push away those parts and hating them so that your parents don't have to constantly do that for you. So now you have become your own abuser and start to treat yourself the same way that your parents and the others around you treated you. And you as a child believe that by doing this, it might be possible to change the things that are so detestable about you. As you can see, this self-hating aspect of you is actually a part of you that is trying to save your life from these parents or people. So it's not really against you, is it? Even though it might seem like it. So in my case, growing up, I was more of the golden child, the favorite one. But the problem for me was that no matter how much I would do or try to gain attention in some way, it was never enough. Or even worse, they were not even present. So for example, let's say that I would come home with a great note from a test, and they would be like, okay. And if I would come home with a bad note, they would be like, okay, that's your problem, you have to resolve this. So I would constantly ask myself, what is it that I'm doing so wrong? Because whatever I do, my parents don't seem to care or to like anything that I do. And because of it, I started to really believe that I was like garbage, like good for nothing, like an ugly monster. And I started to believe that because of it, no one person will ever like me or love me. And if so, only because they want something back from me. I believed that I was so defected that the only purpose why I came here down to earth was to receive punishment for being who I am. Self-hate is such an incredible, dangerous coping mechanism that while it might shield you from external antagonism, it traps you in a life of constant anxiety, living with an enemy within yourself. And that leads to detrimental behaviors such as abusive relationships, risky actions, self-destructive tendency, self-injuries, and even suicide. Now, what steps can you take to start your healing? Step number 1. First thing first, let's be really clear here. Don't expect to love yourself in just a month or weeks. It took me at least 2 years to get to the point of fully feeling love for myself. Try not to be like your parents or the other people around you where everything is so conditional and it has to be now. Say to yourself, I don't care how long it takes to get there. I just want to be present with myself and to listen, to see, to understand my own pain, because that is what I've never had. In order for you to succeed in this process, there is something important you have to be aware and do it first, which is putting yourself first. Putting your healing and your emotions as a number one priority in your life. Otherwise, as soon as you try one thing, and another thing come up and distracts you, and then you don't have time for yourself again, and you lose yourself again, and that will make you think that the healing or the exercises that you try don't work. It will feel like you are constantly starting over or on the level 1 again. Step number 2. It is important to understand all the emotions you feel the most and what they represent, and how to deal with them in a healthy way. The more you understand, the easiest will be for you to start to reconnect with yourself again, to feel and express your pain, and with that, you will be less afraid to try new things. I have already some videos about certain emotions available. Try to study them, start to understand what is inside of you. Step number 3. You have to start to reconnect with yourself again. You can try this following exercise. Start by touching everything around you, even outside. Try to touch everything and then always ask yourself, how does this feel like? Is it hot? Is it cold? Is it soft? Is it hard? Does it feel good in my hand or not so pleasant? And do that with the food you eat as well. Then you can start to go for a walk or even inside the house and try to find some spots or an angle where there is some beauty in it. You may see it on the floor or on the tree or in the corner of a house, who knows? Just look around and search for that beauty. This exercise will help you immensely to develop your boundaries and discover who you are and what you like. We are born so conditioned to like things just because our parents or other people around us like them, and to do things in a certain way just because they do it that way, without questioning anything. So now we have to practically reprogram our brain and teach it that from now on, it's you who decides what you like, not others, you. Number 4, start to find out what are some of the most important needs that you have. This is important because your behaviors and beliefs are all about trying to get your needs met. And when you find that out, you will be able to express them and go directly towards them. I'm going to do a video about needs and how to discover them very soon, but I'm sure that you can find some exercises on the internet already available. Once you start to get to know yourself better and start to understand yourself as well as learning how to express what you are, you will be able to know where to go to be with people that like the things that you do, and you will be able to not feel bad about yourself because you will learn that being you was what you always wanted to be. And when you are surrounded by people who love your authentic self, you will be able to see that there is no reason to hate yourself. You are just in the wrong environment. I know how self-hate feels like. I spent more than 10 years hating everything about me. I had depression and I was also suicidal, but nobody knew it. Not even my ex-boyfriends, because of the way that I was raised. The one thing that was worse for me than someone hating me was someone feeling pity about me. That would be a no-go. So I would hide all my feelings and my problems, and I would walk outside with a big fake smile, pretending to be really happy. But when I was alone, it was way too dangerous and painful. At that time, if I would to combine all my enemies, put them all together over the years, they would not even come closer to how much I hated myself. It was not even a competition. But it came a day where I was so tired of only feeling hate and disgust and pain that an interesting thought came into my mind, and that was, so let's say that everybody hates me, like literally no one person likes me. And when I look in the mirror, I am even more disgusted. So I also hate myself. Now, in this case, what is left here? Nothing, right? And that is what made me suicidal. But then I started to question myself even more. Okay, so the people that I try so hard to please them, they still don't like me. No matter what I do, they seem to not like me anyways. So that means that there is nothing that I can do more about it. Okay, what about me? Is it possible to please me so much until I fall in love with myself? Oh, yeah, I think I have the power to do that. And it was at that moment when I made my goal number one to start my healing journey. And do you want to know what I found? When I started to heal and to finally love myself, what I discovered is that now I can say that there is no one person that will ever love me more than I love myself. A person who knows how to hate intensely is a person who also knows how to love profoundly. That's the beauty of experiencing that kind of hate. So a person who will end up marrying me will win the jackpot. You see, now when I love with all of me. And no, I am actually not afraid anymore of getting hurt or being betrayed because I cannot even control that. And if I lose someone, I know that I will always have me no matter what happens. I cannot control who comes and goes into my life. I can only make the environment around me and inside of me so pleasant that I feel safe and loved by myself. And that also makes the people that come to feel really comfortable here, and they just don't want to leave. They just want to stay here. And that's the power that I have. So I hope this helped in some way. And as usual, I wish you a really nice week.